Multicolor printing with a single nozzle, that's today on Grim 3D. Stay tuned. When you multicolor print with a single nozzle, there's a couple of things you have to keep in mind. So this was multicolor printed with a single nozzle on my Maker Select Plus. And the thing you have to keep in mind is that you're basically not multicolor printing. You're basically tricking the print and the printer to work in tandem to allow you to change the filament at a specific time. For instance, this Grim 3D insignia was printed first, if you can see on there, it's printed all in layers. Okay, so basically I printed up to a point, paused the machine, changed the filament, and then started the print again. And you can see some layers from this side a little bit better. So the first filament that I had in the machine was black, and it printed this whole border, this whole hexagon in black. Okay, and then I switched over to white. So it printed a smaller hexagon in white, but it printed the whole entire thing in white. And then I switched my filament over to a gray. The printer paused, I switched over to a gray. So the gray printed all of this, including underneath here, printed all of this, but it left out these areas because of my file on that particular layer didn't include these areas, so that the white that was printed underneath this gray could show through. And then once the gray was done, I went ahead and printed in blue, and printed actually the 3 and the D in blue. Okay, so this 3 and this D all printed in blue, as you can see right here. There's blue underneath that purple. And then at the very end, I switched over, the printer paused again, and I switched over to this purple to finish it up, so that I actually end up with 5 colors basically stacked on each other that the printer was designed or programmed to pause at specific points for me to switch that filament to make this turn out the way it did, the way I wanted it to. So it's actually, I think it's pretty cool, worked pretty good. This was a design I created. I kind of duplicated. I designed this by hand, but I was trying to duplicate the key cards that you see in the classic video game Doom. Okay, it was for a game my family and I were playing with Nerf guns. Turned out pretty cool. But this one, you can see the layers. If you look on the side, you can see the way the layers laid out. Okay, I started this with yellow, which printed the whole entire thing, of course, in yellow, just to get these little yellow spots, these little yellow squares. So I had the whole thing print in yellow, and then printer pause, and I switched over to the black. The whole thing printed in black, except these little windows that let the yellow show through. And then, after I got done with the black, areas that I wanted all done in black, printed the whole thing, I actually then switched over to the blue to create the blue key card, and the blue areas were what printed at the end to cover up parts of the black, but only in specific areas where you could see the blue. So I'm going to take you through this process, start to finish, and I'll show you a couple of different ways of programming in the pause. I'm going to show you the way I like to do it because for me, it gives me the control that I want, and I'm able to create the pauses pretty well now so that I don't end up having to reprint and reprint and reprint. I've done it enough now that I'm not making a whole lot of mistakes. It works pretty good. I can crank out pretty much anything that I want to do. But as you'll notice, the multicolor 3D printing is really good for, like placards or signs or anything like that, where you can set up specific layers in different areas to create the color effect that you want. It's not going to help you, for instance, if you wanted this whole thing to be flat and then for it to just have the Grim 3D printed in line in the same layer as everything else. For that, you would need some kind of device to create a multi-material kind of setup. And they do make that type of device. There's a couple of really good ones out there. I actually own but have not installed the Multi-Material 2.0S for the Prusa. It's capable of printing in 5 colors. And then there's also a device out there called the Mosaic Palette Pro or Palette 2 Pro. I think they're up to now. That one works really good, and it works on any printer. The Prusa Multi-Material Unit, or MMU 2S, only works on the Prusa. So anyways, I haven't purchased the palette. They're fairly expensive, and for me, this type of multicolor print has worked really well for anything I wanted to do multiple colors with, but it really isn't the best way to do multiple colors. It's just kind of a quick and dirty hack to be able to print multiple colors with a single nozzle. This all starts from the design phase. So let's switch over to the computer. I'll let you look at a design I'm working on for a YouTube subscribe sign that I can put behind me to convince people to subscribe. And by the way, if you haven't yet, subscribe. It's quick, it's easy. Smash the like button, hit the bell, all that kind of YouTube-y stuff. Got a bunch of new subscribers going already, so join the crowd. It's a great place to be. To the computer. So here's a design that I created in Design Spark Mechanical. I do a lot of my work in Design Spark Mechanical. I actually didn't really copy anything. I want it to look like a real YouTube subscribe button or symbol or sign, of course, because that helps people realize or understand what it is. But for the most part, I have just created my own. I drew it all by hand. So there's that. Right now, it's just a line drawing. It has no depth. So this is where the multicolor print process starts. What I want to do with this is I want the area in the background here to be black. So that's going to be my base color. I'm going to start with black. And I'm going to print this at 0.2 millimeter layer height. Now that's important because if you're trying to get a white to cover a black, you need to make sure that you make that area, that layer, thick enough that you can have at least 2 or 3, maybe even 4 layers. So I want this interior of this triangle to be white, and I want the subscribe, the word subscribe, to be white, so I get some good contrast off the black with the white wording. And then I want this outside of this play button triangle in this little screen area, screen looking area, I would like that to be red. So basically I'm ending up with a 3 color print, which means I've got to set up in the black and then program in 2 color changes. So now that I'm in 3-dimensional mode, you can see I have all of these surfaces here that I can pull on, but what I want to do is I want to make sure that this sign has some strength. So my black area, the background, I'm going to make 2 millimeters thick, and then the areas that I want to be white, as in this triangle and all of the letters in the word subscribe, they're going to be another millimeter on top of that, and then this area right here that I want to be red is going to be even another millimeter on top of that. So I'm going to end up with a sign that is basically 2 millimeters and then an extra one for 3 and then an extra one for 4. Now setting this up in layers like this is essential to being able to tell your printer when to stop so that you can change the filament over to your new color. So I'm actually, when I pull this, since I'm going 2, 3, 4, I'm going to start with the tallest one on the pull. So I'm going to take this one and I'm going to pull it up 4 millimeters. So that's perfect for that. And then I'm going to grab all of the pieces that I want to be 3 millimeters high, which remember is the 2 millimeters of the base plus 1 for the white areas. So I am going to select all of the letters, all of the parts of the letters of the word subscribe here. And then I'm going to raise that, pull that up 3 millimeters. So that should be a millimeter. So that gives my, if I'm printing at 0.2 layer height, that gives me between this white, because remember this whole thing is going to be black, and then this whole area is going to be white, and then the whole area I'm going to the very last minute turn red so that it shows up red, but I'm not going to have this go red. This is going to stay white. So that gives me 1 millimeter between the white and the red for the printer to print the red, which at 0.2 layer height is 5 layers. So 5 layers should give me enough, whether it's white, black to white, or white to red, for my new filament to completely obscure the filament that's underneath it. So then my last pull is going to be this base area, but remember, you got to grab the pieces inside the lettering here as well, so that the whole thing, this one is going to come up 2 millimeters. So then when you look at it from the side, you have these layers. If you see that, I'll look at in here. So I've got black, then I've got white, and this is at the same level. So this will also be white, and then this level will be red. So 2 millimeters to start, then another millimeter here for 3 millimeters, and then millimeter here for 4 millimeters. So my sign overall, but just in this area, is going to be 4 millimeters thick and 2 millimeters for the sign itself, which is going to be fairly flexible. I'm going to print this out of PLA. It'll be fairly flexible, but it won't be brittle or snap or, anything like that. I can easily get it on the wall with some command strips or whatever I want to use. So that's this stage of that. Keep in mind that as we trick the printer into doing the multiple layers for us through creatively swapping out the filament, that this is really where it starts. You have to have the layers in your object set up properly. And also remember that the printer for each layer must print the entire layer in that color. In order to do a layer of multiple colors within the same layer, you need some kind of unit or device or machine that can calculate that for you and splice your filament and all that kind of stuff, which is what the Multi-Material 2.0 does, and is also what the Palette Pro or the Palette Plus does. But we're not going to mess with any of that. The good news is, though, we don't have a wipe tower or we're not going to lose any, we're not going to have any junk filament left behind or anything we got to throw away. It should print this straight, flat out, and should be able to handle it easily. Now, we've set up our layers, we've set up our file for our subscribe sign, but now we have to go ahead and start slicing it. I'm going to slice this in 2 programs because the printers that I have deal with this differently. On the MonoPrice Maker Select with your stock firmware, you need to actually find and insert G-code to allow a proper pause on your printer, which we will get into when we get over to the slicer. So that's this. Let's save this file, and then we can roll over to the first slicer, probably the more difficult of the two. We're going to roll over to Cura. I have not upgraded to Cura 4 yet because I'm waiting for them to pretty much work the bugs out. I've been hearing a lot of things online that it's not super great yet, so I'm going to wait and see where it goes. So I am still in I think Cura 3.2 or 3.4. I forget. Anyways, over to Cura. So here we are in Cura. This is actually 3.6. I lied. It's actually 3.6. And you can see that it's for my Maker Select Plus, even though it says Wanhao in the back. The MonoPrice Maker Select Plus is just a rebranded Wanhao i3. So that's what it says. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to import my file. So here is my subscribe sign. You'll see that I did make it a little bit too big for this particular printer because I wanted it to be big enough for the Prusa to do a good job with, and I don't know why I made it. That's huge. Okay, but no big deal. What we're going to do is we are going to resize it. So let's start with a uniform scale, and we'll try 50%. You'll see why I'm doing this in a second. 50% overall, and that still doesn't quite fit, so we'll go back to scaling and we'll try a 45%, still in uniform. So now that fits on the bed just fine. So there it is. The problem is that when you use the uniform scaling, yes, you get the X and the Y and the Z all scaled the same, but we don't want the Z scaled the same because remember, we need those 1 millimeter thick layers. We need the 2, then the 1, then the 1 to do our layering. So I'm actually going to, with it, now that I know 45 is good, I'm going to turn off the uniform scaling. I'm going to put the Z back at 100%. So that's going to give me the 45 and 45, so everything stays in the correct aspect ratio. But then when you look at it this direction, you still have the thickness that you were going for, which is 2 millimeters here, then an extra here, and then an extra there for the layering. Okay, so far that's looking pretty good. I'm going to do a double check on my settings over here since I'm in PLA. I'm going to make sure that everything, the initial layer height and the actual layer height, is 0.2 millimeters. I don't know that any of the lines matter. I'm just going to put this on lines. I like to use this optimized wall printing order because it helps print the walls together on the bed so that they don't scrub each other off of there. I'm just going to go with a standard, my standard of 25 infill pattern in a grid. Let's check out, see what that looks like so far. I always like to check as I go along so that I don't get too far down my print setup and end up with something that I'm not very happy with. So that looks pretty good. Line wall count. Grid. I usually print PLA at 215, build plate temperature of 50. I do, on my printer, it likes a little bit over extrusion. I get a little bit better squish on the initial layer. If I put my initial layer at 110, a lot of people don't even have this turned on. It really doesn't matter for most people, but for me, it makes a difference. My retraction is going to help with the string. Remember, this white here is probably going to string a little bit because it'll be with the black background. So there's that. Hopefully help with the stringing. The speeds I'm going to leave pretty much standard. That's pretty much the Maker Select's top decent speed that it's going to print at. Print cooling with my Cobra cooler, I actually never take my fan over about 60%. If I do, I get warping. So on this one, I think I'm going to lower that a little bit because it's wide and broad and not very thick. So I'm going to lower that to 50% so it doesn't cool too fast. I usually just like to do a skirt so that it primes everything. And then let's prepare this one more time. So I'm looking at an hour, basically 2 hours of print time, which is fine. Generally, I will take this directly to my OctoPrint, but in this case, you won't be able to do that because now we have to put in the layers. Now, here's where the way I do it and the way some others do it might separate out a little bit. A lot of people use an extension in Cura to help them with convince the printer to pause at the right time so you can change the filament between layers. But I prefer a little bit more control than that. So I actually want to take this not to print with to OctoPrint, but I'm actually going to save it to a file. Okay, and I'll show you why in just a second. Be right back. I'm going to save this to a file and open it up in another format. So here I am at the next step of this process, programming in the pauses in the printer. Now you'll see that I have two windows open. I have my slicer open in layer view so that I can look down through the layers and get proper layer counts. And I also have over here, I have my actual G code that I saved to file open in WordPad. Now, some people say not to use WordPad. I've never had any trouble with it. So I use WordPad with my raw G code in there and then be able to look at your layers so that you know what you're doing. What we're first going to do is, if you remember, we are printing the bottom part. This is all layer 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 10, because we're printing at 0.2 layer height, and our black was 2 millimeters. So that means 10 layers of just black. So this part we don't even have to mess with. It's just black. Before the printer starts on layer 11, you'll notice here, layer 11, it is printing the actual subscribe word. It's done printing any of the background. It's printing this play button and the subscribe letters on layer 11. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here and I'm going to find that layer. Now here's kind of a little caveat in the way computers count things. You'll notice right here that this is considered layer 0 with my Z axis at 0.2 millimeters. So that's my first layer, but the computer counts it as layer 0. You have to actually subtract one. So we're not going to search for layer 11 like it says over here, because this has been turned into math that's more understandable by humans. We like to start at 1 as the first layer, but the computer likes to start at 0. So you have to adjust that in your search. We're looking for layer 11. So over here, I'm going to copy this, Control C on the keyboard, and I'm going to hit a Control F for a find window. You'll notice that since I copied it, it put it in here for me automatically. And then I'm going to change this to layer 10 and click Find Next. So there's my layer 10. You'll know that you're in the right place if you look at this first line of movement G code tells the printer to raise the Z-axis to 2.2. So now if you're doing the math right in your head, you realize that our first 10 layers at 0.2 was 2 millimeters, so that our very first new color layer, which is layer 11, should be at a Z-axis value of 2.2. So we are in the right place. So before it does any of these movements, so right here after layer 10, I'm going to make a space in there and I'm going to copy in my G code that I've created, or I mean, it's kind of a mash between stuff I found online and stuff I've created myself, ways that I've edited a little bit. Anyways, but here's the G code that I'm going to copy in there. If you pause on that, you can see exactly what it is. But the thing to remember about G code is that the G's with the numbers and the codes right here, that's what your printer sees and understands. Anything that comes after a semicolon is for humans only. The printer doesn't even look at that. So if it has a semicolon in front of it, printer ignores it completely. So all it's seeing actually are these codes on the left here, but these statements on the right are to help me know and remember exactly what each one of these is doing. So I mean, you can look through there. The core of this, however, is this one right here, okay, where it prompts the printer to wait for the user. So all of this is moving the print head out of the way, retracting the filament, whatever it's going to do. I do like to disable the stepper motor timeout, because if our stepper motor's timeout, then your print head is freewheeling. If it's freewheeling and you bump it while you're trying to switch the filament out, then you get a layer shift, which is brutal, and it just ends your print right there. You can't really fix it. So I disable that timeout while it waits, so that while I'm changing the filament, the motors are locked. The stepper motors just lock in place. So it's not foolproof, but it really helps. And then right here, it re-enables the timeout, puts it back into movement mode, and then throws the print head and everything back where it belongs. So that's kind of how it works. I'm not a G-code expert at all. Found a bunch of this online, edited it, by myself to decide what worked, and then just trial and error kind of stuff. So I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to bring it over here, and I am going to paste it in here, so that, if I were to look through here in the future, I would know where it is. So that's our first pause for our first filament change. So we've printed everything down in this part of the print in black, and then right there, printer paused before it started layer 11, switched it to white, then it's going to print layer 11. And so now, since we did 1 millimeter layers, we can go up basically 5 layers, and right there on layer 16 is where it's going to fill in this play symbol. So right there, we want to do, on layer 16, we want to do another pause before we start layer 16, which over here, remember, is labeled as layer 15. So over here, we're going to open up our find window again, and we're going to go to layer 15 and hit find next. And then there's our layer 15, and we will know that we're at the right place because our Z is being told to move to 3.2. See how this all works together. We created our file in those layers, our object in those layers, and we're remembering that we've got 2 millimeters in black, 1 millimeter in white, and then the top millimeter in red. So everything from Z-axis position 3.2 and up to the end of the print is going to be in red. So right here, after it calls out the change to layer 15, and remember this, since it has a semicolon in front of it, that's just for humans. The printer totally ignores that. Okay, so then right there, I'm just going to paste in my G-code pause again. Okay, so now I've got 2 pauses in there, which allows me to print with 3 colors, because we start with the black, we pause to change to the white, we pause to change to the red. Now all I got to do is save that and send it to my printer. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're using a printer with OctoPrint or whether you are using a printer with an SD card, you literally just need to now get this into your printer. It's ready to go. So I'm going to save it. Yes, text only format is fine. And then now we are going to throw it to my printer, start the print. I'll see you in a second. So here we are nearing the end of layer 10. So before we jump onto layer 11, we should see a pause here and an opportunity to change the filament to white. There's the rays, there it parked, it's paused, it's ready for me to change the filament to white. So I am going to go ahead and remove this filament, roll that back onto my spool. I'm going to grab the white filament that I have in my filament holder up here. Going to bring that down. I'm going to insert the white filament. And I did not program in any purge routine that the printer takes care of for me, so I will have to manually purge it by pushing it through. So I'm trying to push through just enough so that underneath there, maybe you can see that underneath here, you can see that it's going to eventually turn from black to white. Grab that, pull it out of there, so it doesn't impact onto the head. Do a little bit more because I'm still seeing it be quite gray. Move that out of the way. One more time. So now I'm seeing a nice clean white. And I need to restart the print, which you can do either from the print menu on your printer's control screen, or you can do from the resume button in OctoPrint. But because I'm using OctoPrint, that's what I'm going to do with this machine. I'm just going to go over to my computer and click the resume button on OctoPrint, and then we get to see one of my most favorite parts of 3D printing. I just love the precision and how it's able to lay that second color right down on top of the first. Now it's going to go ahead and do the white for 4 more layers and 5 layers total, and then we will be back here to change over to the red. So here we are at the end of the 16th layer, where we should see another pause happen to change filament one more time over to a red color. So here we go. So here's our pause. Once again, we're going to remove filament that is in the machine, and then I have my red ready to go. I'm going to feed that in there and then purge enough through, if you can see the purge. I'm going to purge enough through that the white is out of the nozzle, and I have clean red in the nozzle. So that looks really good, and once again I'm going to click the resume button on OctoPrint. Now we should just be doing this play sign in red. That's all that's actually left. And it's going to do 5 layers of the red. So even though you could probably see some white through it at this point, once it gets the 5th layer of red in there, you won't be able to see any of the white shining through or peeking through. And I will see you in another 5 layers. So we're coming up at the very end of the print here. It's going to just end as it normally does, and we shall see what we get. And there you have it. A 3-color subscribe sign that I'm putting on the wall behind me. So there you have it. Multicolor printing with a single nozzle. For the most part, I think I probably do this the hard way, but I like the control and I like to be able to see what's going on. I don't have a problem editing the G-code, especially if you have a good G-code snippet to go in there to create your pause. You just need to be really careful swapping the filament out so that you don't bump anything or create a layer shift. A couple of ending thoughts on this one. This subscribe sign, which I'm going to put on the wall behind me, it was a lot of fun to print. You'll notice that on the sides still we have the multiple layers of the black and then the white and then the red. So if that really bothered me, I think I would just go through right here and hit this with a red Sharpie or something. Will help that on the edge just kind of disappear a little bit, kind of fade out. And then another note is that the method that I used in actually joining G-code, specific G-code commands in a group to create the pause has been superseded on a lot of your printers these days. In fact, the MonoPrice Maker Select Plus, if you are running the ADV i3 firmware on it, instead of putting in the whole large piece of code, you really only have to put in one G code. You just put in M600. And that's the same way it works on the Prusa. So I would go through and set up both screens with the layers on one side and my G code on the other, find where I want to put the pause, and just put in an M600 code. So that actually works pretty well. This video is getting pretty long, so I'm not going to show you that one. It works exactly the same way, except instead of needing a large chunk of G-code to go in there to give specific individual commands for your machine to do everything one step at a time, it's all wrapped up into an M600 code that is built into the firmware on your printer, and it does whatever it was programmed to do by whoever programmed it to do that. So that's about it for this episode of Grim 3D. I'd like to once again thank my new subscribers. The channel's getting a little bit bigger. That's pretty awesome. And I would like to tell everybody to subscribe. I know that I've got at least 400 or 500 new unique viewers every month. So subscribe if you would like. Keep the comments civil. Smash that like button. Ring the bell. We'll see you out there.